Let's get into it. Soul Not For Sale podcast. Coach Colin here. I got Joe Rogan and Tucker is calling out someone who I was just talking about last episode. And I was wondering whether or not Trump could trust this guy. Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson. Tucker calls this guy out in the best way possible. And it sent me down this rabbit hole. I wanted to check out Mike Johnson just a little bit. So I have a couple, just a few clips, 1, 2, 3, 4 clips of him and people talking about him. Then it actually made me remember something that Hillary Clinton said. And then I linked it to Mike Johnson and people like Nikki Haley. You know, just those types. We'll get into that in a little bit. And then I have also something from Tucker Carlson where he expands on what he's saying on the Joe Rogan Experience. And I just want you guys to see it all. Just what he's talking about in this clip is weak men and good and evil. That's how we can sum it up. And I want to walk down that road because I think we could all agree we're starting to see that. But we don't call it that. We call it something else. Let's get into it. This channel right here, don't forget to subscribe. It is my new channel where I break away from the Rogan content and just bring you daily news. 2 to 4 episodes a day. We got how many episodes up? We got 44 episodes up right now. You can click the subscribe button, binge on that stuff if you want. If not, stay right here. We got Joe Rogan for you. Let's go.
Computer.
Right.
Members of Congress are terrified of the intel agencies. I'm not guessing at that. They've told me that, including people on the intel committee, including people who run the intel committee, the people whose job it is to oversee and keep in line these enormous secretive agencies whose budgets we can't even know. They're black budgets. They're the parents. The agencies are the children. They're afraid of the agencies. That's not compatible with democracy. Democracy is a really simple system, even representative democracy like ours. The people rule. They do so through elections. They express their preference through voting. They send their people to the capital city to run the government on their behalf. Whenever you have unelected people who are not accountable to anyone making the biggest decisions, you don't have a democracy. You have something else, another system. I would call it a tyranny or whatever you want to call it. It's not a democracy. So that's like super obvious. It's playing out in front of everyone and no one cares and no one does anything about it. And I think the reason is because they're threatened. And if you look at the committee chairmen who allow this shit to happen year after year, they're all, and I don't know, people say, oh, they're compromised or being blackmailed or whatever. I don't have evidence of that, but I know them and they all have things to hide. I know that for a fact. And so it's not a stretch of imagination to imagine that, you know, some committee chairman who's allowing warrantless spying on Americans to continue or whatever abuse they're allowing, knowing fully or hiding the truth about UAPs, ignoring the UAP Disclosure Act of 2023. Like, why are they doing that? It's not impossible to imagine that some guy with a drinking problem or a weird sex life, and that's very common up there, that's why they're doing it. Because they don't want to be exposed. I don't have evidence of that. I don't have proof of that.
Right.
But that's not a crazy thing to assume that could be happening. And I said to somebody, a very powerful person, the other day in a conversation in my kitchen, an elected official, holds a really senior position, a very famous person. I was going crazy. I was so mad about all this stuff and about the warrantless spying and about the funding for these insane wars. And I said to the guy who serves in one of the legislative bodies, I got so mad my dogs were afraid. They're like, well, why are you yelling? Because I don't yell at home. But I was like, all these people are controlled. They're all, you know, got weird sex lives and all these things are hiding and they're being blackmailed by the intel agencies. And he said, and I'm quoting, I know. It was like, okay, so at this point we're just sort of admitting that's real? Like, why do we allow that to continue?
The having people compromise thing, God, that's an old story.
It's the oldest story.
J. Edgar Hoover. I mean, it's all of them. It's Epstein's Island. It's everything.
But look, I don't have any. I'm telling you. What's the phrase the finance guys use? Open kimono. Like, I'm actually telling you all I know. I don't know anything else.
Right.
But I know that the publicly available facts tell a really clear story, which is the government is not acting on behalf of the population, and so it's inherently illegitimate because its only legitimacy derives from the citizenry. The only reason the government can do things that it does, kill people, collect money by force, all the powers that it has, come from one place, and that's the consent of the governed. That's the only legitimacy they have.
And that's where it's fascinating, this concept of good and evil. Because when you think about it, if this is true, and if these people are compromised because they're secretly perverts and creeps.
They are, though.
And they're corrupt, and they steal money, or all these different things are evil things. Lying, controlling people, engaging in unnecessary wars that are going to cost thousands of lives for profit. All these things are evil things. So if evil is real, evil would want those kind of people to be in a position of power.
Yes, and
evil would want men to breastfeed their children.
Here's the Here's the illusion that we fall for time and again. We imagine that evil comes like fully advertised as such. Like evil people look like Anton LaVey.
Horns,
yeah.
Right. Black,
You know what I mean?
black cloak,
Exactly.
sickle.
Evil is an independent force that exists outside of people, that acts upon people. I really believe that. I've experienced it a lot. And it's obvious. And what vessel do they choose? The weak. It's weak men and women who are instruments of evil. The weaker the leader, the more evil that leader will be. So and unfortunately, we've reached a time in American history where every leader is either a woman or a weak man, pretty much. And so I'm sorry to say it, that's just true. And the weaker the leader, that's why Mike Johnson, everyone's like, oh, Mike Johnson's such a nice guy. Well, I know Mike Johnson, and he's a perfectly nice guy to the extent that he's like polite and seems kind of meek and restrained, and he's not saying motherfucker ever, you know what I mean? He's got like very sort of buttoned down affect. But he's a weak man, and that's the man you should be afraid of. The people who you shouldn't be less afraid of are the, headstrong, loud, don't care what anybody thinks. Yeah, those guys will go off track, but they're probably not going to abet, genocide or blow up the world in a nuclear exchange, because they may be obnoxious, but they know who they are. Weak people just become a host for evil, an open, empty building that evil occupies, possesses even. And that's exactly what's happening to Mike Johnson. It's like absolutely crazy what Mike Johnson is doing. But it's not because he's evil. It's because he's weak and therefore susceptible to evil. It's a meaningful distinction that I have noticed.
It is a very strange thing how many weak people wind up being leaders in this society. And particularly because so many people don't want their life exposed. They don't want that eye of Sauron gazing down upon them if they try to run for president.
I get it.
Yeah.
Or the physical threat.
Yeah, physical. I mean, look at what's happening to RFK, where the Biden administration, for the first time ever, denied him Secret Service protection.
It's absolutely
as a legitimate presidential candidate.
Well, it's absolutely nuts.
Yeah.
I mean, how is that? I mean, it's hard. You realize that a lot of the things that we took for granted were actually voluntary. Like, people just didn't do things because, like, that's just wrong. That's not fair. You know what I mean? That's bad sportsmanship. Like, there was a lot of, like, self-restraint involved in running a functional society. You can't you can't just make an infinite number of laws and enforce them. That's impossible. You rely on people to just not do bad shit because, like, I'm not that kind of person who does bad shit. Mm-hmm. And once the people in charge decide, well, I'm just going to do whatever I want, not a lot you can do about it. So the Biden administration denies him Secret Service protection, and you're like, how can you do that? They're like, well, we're doing it. What are you going to do about it, bitch?
Sad, but true. Very, very true. There isn't much anybody can do about it. And what has anybody done about it? Everybody's just kind of been like, you're not giving them, that shows a lot, not giving them Secret Service protection. But what has anybody really done? I mean, what has he even done? He asked for it, they denied it, and he's just kind of spoke about it here and there, but he's never petitioned or tried to get the American people behind him or anything. So I guess Tucker's kind of right. It's very interesting. Now, when he talks about weak men, right away, what comes to mind is that whole hard times make strong men make good times make weak men make hard times. I think that's how it works. And that's exactly what's happening, And I love that he called out Mike Johnson, because like I said at the beginning, I've been thinking about this guy, looking at this guy. I saw Trump with him. Trump was backing him, saying, he's elected and, he's okay. And, they were sharing a stage. Speaker of the House went to Mar-a-Lago, and I was like, okay. But I was just like, I don't like the base judgment on how people look. But he looks shifty, right? So I started questioning it. I started asking the question in these episodes, and I'm so glad Tucker brought this up, because honestly, he doesn't seem trustworthy, and the things that he has done so far are just not trustworthy things. These are things that are not in the interest of the American people. They're just not in the interest of anybody. I mean, unless you're Ukraine or Israel or Taiwan. So it's very, very interesting. Now, what else he said what was interesting is he was talking about Trump. He didn't want to say Trump, but he was saying the guys who like tell it how it is and they're loud and this and that, and they might go off track, but they won't allow genocide to happen. He's talking about Trump. That's exactly who Trump is. And as he was saying that, I realized people who are like that, who are like Trump, they know who they are because they're so open about who they are. When you're just telling it how it is and you're just speaking your mind and you're going at people and you're defensive and you're willing to go back and forth with it, you learn who you are so quickly because not only are you letting it out all the time and learning that way, but people are also telling you, because they're going to be mad at you, they're going to love you. So you learn who you are really quickly, and you become really comfortable with it very fast. Whereas if you are a weak man, you're very closed, you're very shy, you keep who you actually are very hidden. So you don't ever really learn who you are because you're never exposing it. You're always keeping it under wraps. Always keeping it under wraps. Now, let's just talk about Mike Johnson a little bit. I saw this clip from him, and I was like, okay. Like, this is a clip that he said just recently. I think it was just yesterday he said this after he passed that bill. Listen to this.
Israel is a critical ally of ours, and I think most people understand the necessity of this funding. They're fighting for their very existence. They're the only stable democracy in the Middle East. I mean, of course, for those of us who are believers, it's a biblical admonition to stand with Israel. We will, and they will prevail as long as they're with them. And this is an important, very important symbolic gesture and a very important replenishment of their stockpiles, for example, of the Iron Dome. The reason they shot down all those drones and missiles in the last attack by Iran is because we assisted with that. I think the American people understand the importance of that. Israel is a critical...
It's so sad that he's saying stuff like this. And again, as I watch these clips of him, I'm like thinking of what Tucker said about being a vessel for evil. But we don't call it evil. We call it spineless. We call it this. We call it that. But when he says a vessel, that makes so much sense. Listen to this. This was another thing where he sounded especially woke. He's talking about white privilege and how it's just a really real thing, which I was really surprised about.
Do you feel when you watch the video of George Floyd being killed?
I was outraged. I don't think anyone can view the video and objectively come to any other conclusion but that it was an act of murder. And I felt that initially, as everyone did. It's so disturbing. And, you know, the underlying issues beneath that are something that the country is now struggling with. And I think it's something we have to look at very soberly and with a lot of empathy. And I'm glad to see that's happening around the country. You know, what it's taught me is we now have 4 other children of our own. And my oldest son, Jack, ironically, this year is 14. And I've thought often through all these ordeals over the last couple of weeks about the difference in the experiences between my 2 14-year-old sons, Michael being a Black American and Jack being white, Caucasian. They have different challenges. My son, Jack, has an easier path. He just does. The interesting thing about both of these kids, Michael and Jack, is they're both handsome, articulate, really talented kids, gifted by God to do lots of things. But the reality is, and no one can tell me otherwise, my son Michael had a harder time than my son Jack is going to have simply because of the color of his skin. And that's a reality. It's an uncomfortable, painful one to acknowledge, but people have to recognize that's a fact.
What should we do about that?
I think that we really do need systematic change. I think we need transformative solutions.
Now, I mean, kudos to him for being a father. That's great. Fantastic. I'm sure he's a great dad. But it goes back to what Tucker said, this being that vessel. You know? It's like, oh, well, we're talking about George Floyd and everything. Okay, systematic change. You know? We're talking about Israel. Oh, we need Israel. He's this kind. It's almost like he's just going with the flow of whatever is going to make him look the best. And I didn't realize this when he got into the position of Speaker of the House. I didn't like it because I wanted Jim Jordan to be Speaker of the House because I think Jim Jordan is great. And I think he really stands up for what's right from what I've seen. I'm sure anybody can dig up dirt on anybody, but from what I've seen of him, he seems like a decent man. When this guy got in office, I was like, he seems like a Smith agent. You know, from the Matrix. Like if there was a new Matrix, like a new one, Matrix 5, I would make him a Smith agent, 100%. Right? I don't know. It just seems like he's going with the flow. And again, just seems rather. You know what? You know what sums it up pretty quick? This person commented right here. They're like, Mike Johnson is a Democrat. Like, that's it. Mike Johnson is a Democrat. That's what it seems like. That's what it really seems like to me. It's as if he's some kind of Democrat in disguise. And we're going to get into that when I play the Hillary clip, because she said something along those lines. Not about him, but just in general in regards to what needs to happen in the Republican Party. Listen to this.
Vote down. We saw all your frustration with Mike Johnson. So is today the day you're going to call for the vote seeking his ouster?
I'm actually going to let my colleagues go home and hear from their constituents, because I think people have been too obsessed with voting for foreign wars and the murder industry here in America to actually understand how angry Americans are. When you have the strongest, loudest voices in the Republican movement and grassroots, furious, calling for Mike Johnson to be vacated. The people here, my colleagues, have not heard the message. So I'm looking forward for them to go home and hearing from the folks back at home. But this is the sellout of America today. When we had members of Congress in there waving the Ukrainian flag on the United States House of Representatives floor, while we're doing nothing to secure our border, I think every American in this country should be furious. Who's going to vote for these people? How can you vote for these people? They don't serve our country.
Are you promising to call a vote on a motion to vacate eventually?
I don't think you were listening very well.
No, you said you'd wait for your constituents, but will you ever call it for a vote?
But I mean, given what you said, do Republicans deserve to be in the majority?
That's up to the people, because this is the third betrayal by Mike Johnson. He delivered a two-part omnibus, funded the Department of Justice, 91 federal indictments against President Trump, funded the FBI that raided Mar-a-Lago, gave him a brand new FBI building, funded Joe Biden's open border policies that are killing Americans every single day. Then he reauthorized FISA that spied on American citizens, spied on President Trump's campaign, and he voted against the warrant requirement, the same warrant requirement that he was for 6 months ago. And then he did this bullshit in here on the House floor, foreign war package that does nothing for America. It's unbelievable. I'm thankful that America gets to see who this man is. I'm thankful that America gets to see who the people that voted for this is, because this is the only way it's going to change. People have to see the truth.
Why would he do all of those things? Again, Tucker, what he said, you become a vessel or almost possessed for evil. You just start doing things. He's not an evil man. It's just weak, and then you become susceptible to evil. It's very, very true, right? What is the saying? The road to hell is paved with good intentions. You have the best intentions, but you're just going down this route and you're doing all these things, and it's hurting the American people. And you're sitting around saying, "Oh, I'm sure the American people understand." It's like, have you talked to any? Have you been around any in months? Do you interact with regular people on a daily basis? Maybe you should. Maybe you should have to. I don't get it. But again, everything that she just said, that's why I played that clip, because she just laid out everything that he's done. This hasn't been that long of him being in this position. It's been, what, six months? This doesn't make any sense. But again, so many times, and this is why Tucker brings up that whole good and evil thing, because usually you'd call this a whole bunch of other names, and you'd be like, "Oh, these people don't know what they're doing," and this and that. But at a certain point, when you see it over and over and over again, and as he said, the government not acting, in the interest of the people, you have to think, well, maybe this is on purpose. I mean, like she just said, 3 different betrayals. He's not incompetent. He's getting things done. It's just, what kind of things is he getting done? He's not stumbling around. He knows what he's doing. You hear him talk. He's clearly some kind of intelligence rattling around in his head. So you have to look and say, maybe this is not an incompetent person. Maybe this is a very competent person, and they just have no interest in doing what's necessary for the citizens. That's what it seems like to me. And Tucker Carlson calling him weak was just perfect for me. It's not. I don't have any malicious intent towards the guy or anything. It's just, that's what I was thinking. I'm like, is this guy weak? But I only know so much from the clips and the reading, and you only know so much. But when I hear Tucker all of a sudden say, "Yeah, this guy is weak," and then you hear Marjorie Taylor Green saying the same type of thing, it is good to see this guy for who he is. Here, let's play one more, and then I'm gonna think we'll move on to Hillary or Tucker after.
Marjorie fails to notice is that we have been fighting on the border. We fight on it every day. We passed our comprehensive border security package, H.R. 2, at the very beginning of this Congress. It's been sitting on Chuck Schumer's desk. We passed all the resolutions. We passed these acts out of the House, and they get stopped in the Senate.
And that was the Speaker of the House, Louisiana Congressman Mike Johnson, with me here last weekend, referring to Georgia Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene's threat to file a motion to vacate the Speaker's chair after the Republican-led House passed a $1.2 trillion spending bill last month with still no new security at the southern border, and then yesterday passed an additional $95 billion in new foreign aid, $60 billion of which is going to Ukraine. Since then, 2 other congressmen have joined Taylor Greene's effort to vacate the chair, Kentucky Congressman Thomas Massie and Arizona Congressman Paul Gosar, saying that Speaker Johnson surrendered House Republican leverage to secure the border by tying urgent aid to Israel to Ukraine. But the Congresswoman did not ultimately file the motion after the vote yesterday. Joining me now with the very latest is the woman herself, in this Sunday Morning Futures exclusive, House Oversight Committee member, Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene. Congresswoman, thanks very much for being here. I want to give you the opportunity to respond to critics. First off, yesterday, we saw the bills pass, and you did not file the motion to vacate. Why not?
That's right, Maria. I've been responsible with this the entire time. I support our majority, and I support having the majority in 2025. But I'm a representative of the people, Maria, and I do not represent Washington, D.C., New York Times, any of these media companies and other Republican colleagues of mine that are criticizing me, even the Speaker himself. Most of those people have lost their way, and they aren't listening to the American people. The people are fed up. Last Monday was tax day, April 15th, and Washington betrayed the American people by sending $93 billion to support foreign wars while doing nothing, absolutely nothing to secure our border. That is a complete...
Now, I'm just going to say this. I mean, let's get into the question of, all the weak people that we see in place, right? Mike Johnson. Then go on to what Tucker said at the beginning, how all of these people are scared to death of the intel agencies. And then we look even at her, who I like her. I like her a lot. But, hey, did you do a motion to vacate? No. Is she afraid too? Tucker brought it up. He's like, why is it all weak men and just women who are these leaders? Kind of makes you think. She's the one that said that there's been 3 betrayals. She's the one that said she's happy America gets to see this guy for who he is. But no motion to vacate. Are you afraid? She could say that she wants to keep majority and everything, and that makes sense, but I don't know. Is it in the best interest of the people? It's fun for your side to be majority and this and that, but what's actually best for the people right now? Left or right? Is there someone who won't do stuff like this? Can you find that person? Can you put them in the position? I don't get it. Another thing I realized as I was listening to all this, the first thing Mike Johnson said when he got into his position was something about standing with Israel. And it's like, great, okay, I get it. But that's the first thing you say. You take an American position, and the first thing you say is how you are going to support Israel. It seems so nuts. Weak men. But listen, and it's not just Mike Johnson. I mean, think about all the guys who are in place right now that would fall under what Tucker was saying, right? You got Dan Crenshaw, who's done horrible things to his own fellow SEALs, right? Had a beef with David Goggins because David Goggins called him out as a fraud. You got AOC, who's definitely just, a riot happens and she's like, well, people need bread. And that's all this is. Sometimes people need bread, and that's why they go to the Gucci store and take belts, because, nothing goes better with bread than belts, right? It's just, that makes sense, right? Then she goes to the Met Gala where it's like $50,000 a ticket, and she wears a dress that says "Eat the Rich." That's why, you really got to take what Tucker said seriously. Is there some kind of possession going on? What is this? Again, we always look at all these people and we go, oh, just so incompetent. We call them all these names. Maybe this is very intentional. Because again, they're getting things done. It's just things that no citizen wants to see happen. It's wild. Pelosi, another weak person. Biden alone is the epitome of that. At the very top of everything. And then you look at someone like Trump and you see the strength that he has when he goes into any conversation. You see the strength that he has when he's dealing with world leaders. And somehow we've been taught that that person, their attitude is unstatesmanly. That's what we're hearing from guys like Stephen A. Smith and Michael Rappaport. And nonsense. Or Brett Weinstein. He's not statesmanly enough. But he gets things done. And the results don't matter. Even though the results are good for the citizens, those results don't matter. You don't want him. We can't have him in office. What's going on here? Maybe there is some kind of possession. Because as soon as someone raises their hand to step in as good, it seems like they get shot down. They get demonized. I mean, like, again, you guys already know my bias. My bias is towards Trump. I like Trump. But even RFK Jr. seems like a good man. He seems like a good man. He seems like there's no possession of evil within him. Like he will not do anything evil. He will do things that benefit the people. That's what it seems like. I know he's had some weird gun stuff that he's touched on before, which he shouldn't have said, shouldn't even have thought. But he seems good, and even he becomes unacceptable. A danger to the public, his own sister called him. I don't know, man. It's very interesting. Let's go with Hillary. This is what Hillary said. This is a video of her. If you watch both channels, I apologize. You probably saw this clip just yesterday, but I just want to show this clip where she's talking about reprogramming people, but then she touches on something that really speaks to what this video is about. Let's go.
For himself. He's now defending himself in civil actions and criminal actions. And when do they break with him? Because at some point, maybe there needs to be a formal deprogramming of the cult members, but something needs to happen.
And how do you do that? Because you said you have to defeat them by defeating their leader. Their leader is Donald Trump. Even you have said that you expect him to be the Republican nominee. How does this change at all?
At this point, I think, sadly, he will still likely be the nominee, and we have to defeat him. And we have to defeat those who are the election deniers, as we did in 2020 and 2022. And we have to, just be smarter about how we are trying to empower the right people inside the Republican Party.
We have to be smart about who we empower in the empowering the right people in the Republican Party. Isn't that an odd thing for her to say? What does that mean? I want to hear her say that again. Hold on. This is very odd.
And we have to, just be smarter about how we are trying to empower the right people inside the Republican Party. Nancy.
Right away, I think of Mike Johnson. I'm like, well, she said this, I believe she said this either as he was becoming or just before he became Speaker of the House. Not really sure. This is about 6 months ago, right? Then, within this 6 months, we see Nikki Haley as well. And she was, in my opinion, she was an obvious Democrat. It was just obvious. So again, when I see Mike Johnson, I'm like, maybe he was one of the right people. Maybe. Again, I don't know. I've just, in the past week or so, have just been hearing about this guy, seeing what he's been doing, the things that, from spying on American people and aiding that to happen without warrants, to the Ukraine, to the Israel stuff. He just seems like he's not operating in the interest of the people at all. And he's had every opportunity to do so. Let's end it off with Tucker. He's expanding on the whole concept of good and evil. Let's get into it.
That's kind of the point I'm making. None of this makes sense in conventional political terms. When people or crowds of people, or the largest crowd of people at all, which is the federal government, the largest human organization in human history, decide that the goal is to destroy things, destruction for its own sake. Hey, let's tear it down. What you're watching is not a political movement, it's evil. So if you want to assess, and I'll put it in I'll stop with this. I'll put it in non-political, or non-specific theological terms, and just say, if you want to know what's evil and what's good, what are the characteristics of those? And by the way, I think the Athenians would have agreed with this. This is not necessarily just a Christian notion. This is kind of I would say, widely agreed upon understanding of good and evil. What are its products? What do these two conditions produce? Well, good is characterized by order, calmness, tranquility, peace, whatever you want to call it, lack of conflict, cleanliness. Cleanliness is next to godliness. It's true. It is. And evil is characterized by their opposites: violence, hate, disorder, division, disorganization, and filth. So if you are all in on the things that produce the latter basket of outcomes, what you're really advocating for is evil. That's just true. I'm not calling for a religious war, far from it. I'm merely calling for an acknowledgement of what we're watching, which is not what, and I'm certainly not backing the Republican Party. I'm not making a partisan point at all. I'm just noting what's super obvious. Like, those of us who are in our mid-50s are caught in the past in the way that we think about this. One side's like, no, I've got this idea, and we've got this idea, and let's have a debate about our ideas. They don't want a debate. Those ideas won't produce outcomes that any rational person would want under any circumstances. Those are manifestations of some larger force acting upon us. It's just so obvious. It's completely obvious. And I think two things. One, we should say that and stop engaging in these totally fraudulent debates where we are using the terms that we used in 1991 when I started at Heritage, as if maybe, I could just win the debate if I marshaled more facts. I've tried that, doesn't work. And two, maybe we should all take just like 10 minutes a day to say a prayer about it. I'm serious. Like, why not? And
So, yeah, just in different terms, this has been an idea that Tucker's been bouncing around for quite some time. About 2 years he's been bringing this up, and I think it's becoming more and more apparent as we see how these people in power actually do act. And you have to think, you can't call it, you're calling it, I'm still going to call it woke. I'm still going to use the word woke, but calling it woke, calling it just leftist, just Marxist, just silly, just misguided, just incompetent, all of that does the disservice when it's really evil. And if these people are just weak and they're afraid of agencies or this or that, physical harm, like they were saying in the clip, all of that gives way for them to do evil things in the hopes that it preserves their career and, even more nefarious, their life. Because who knows what kind of threats these people are under. I have no idea. I don't know what it's like to deal with anything like that. I'm not that big yet. So, yeah, that's really what's going on. And you know what? I've been asking the question, but I know now. I was asking you, can you trust Mike Johnson? And the answer for me is no. No. You can't trust this guy. I really do hope President Trump wakes up to that. Because right now, I think he thinks he has a Republican Speaker of the House, and I think in reality he has a Democrat. And I think even more so, again, that's a little bit of a disservice. He has a man who may, under duress, do what he's told. And that can range from a little thing to $90 billion, to just saying, white guilt or white privilege is real, to $95 billion for anything but America, to God knows what's next. I mean, I can mention the spying on Americans without a warrant at all, to God knows what's next. So think about that. Think about all the weak leaders that you see, and start realizing that, there's something acting on them. There's some force that is pulling them and pushing them, and it's because you want strong people, and again, my bias. I like Trump, but you want guys like Trump who are just going to say it like it is, who are going to get threats by whoever, agency, whatever, and they're still not going to fold. That's just me. That's what I think. Let me know what you guys think about this whole thing. Tucker Carlson calling out Mike Johnson. Let me know what you think in the comments. Like, subscribe, share them out.